Hey guys, tonight we slip into something sticky, sour and slightly armor-stained. You're standing in the faint grey light just before dawn, windless and heavy with that odd metallic tang that always shows up when 100 men are quietly adjusting swords and pretending they're not nervous. Your own armor or pinches a little under the ribs. You probably shouldn't have skipped the padding layer, but it's too late for regrets. Your hand drifts to your pouch and pulls out the small, shriveled orb that might be the worst decision of the morning, an umeboshi. This thing? It's a pickled plum, though that description does it no justice. It's aggressively sour, boldly briny. It has the flavor profile of a slap across the face and a strong opinion about your dental enamel. But you pop it into your mouth anyway, because that's what's expected. Samurai have been eating these before battle for generations, not just for the salt and preserved vitamin C, but because supposedly they wake you up and toughen your guts, literally, metaphorically, maybe spiritually. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you listening from tonight? At what time is it there? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your boots crunch softly against gravel as you walk. No one talks much. Everyone's doing the same slow chewing, jaws working over those ferocious plums in synchronized sour agony. The umeboshi isn't just a snack, it's practically ritual. You bite down, eyes watering slightly, and keep walking through the mist. Historians still argue whether the plum's real function was nutritional or psychological. Salt was vital, yes, and the preserved fruit lasted forever, which was crucial in a world where battles might be delayed by weather, insults, or bad astrology. But also, there's something about beginning a day of potential death with something that jolts your entire nervous system. You feel awake and a little betrayed. You glance sideways and see another soldier do the same thing, quick grimace, then a grunt of acceptance. There's a tiny, unspoken brotherhood in this moment, the Sour Face Club. Everyone's in, even the captain. One scroll from the Sengoku period even describes the pickled plum as the thunder that wakes the heart, which sounds romantic until you remember it's also been known to cause mild ulcers if overconsumed. But whatever works. Some armies made batches in bulk, stewing unripe plums in barrels of salt and red perilla leaves. Others treated them like treasure, carrying just one or two in tightly wrapped cloth pouches tied to their belts. And you've got yours tucked in a lacquered box next to a spare sandal strap. Because who needs balance in life? The trees thin out and your group starts descending into a shallow valley. The sky shifts from violet to pale blue, and your stomach gives that first gentle lurch, the one that says, that plum was cute, but how about real food? You've still got an hour's march before the actual battle line, and the only thing on your mind is whether there's an onigiri with your name on it. Spoiler alert, there is. But not yet. Someone sneezes loudly ahead of you. A ripple of low laughter follows. It's the first real sound since you started walking. You get the sense that maybe, just maybe, the plum worked. Everyone's more alert now, slightly more alive, and maybe a touch more sarcastic. There's a theory, and it's very unofficial, that the extreme sourness of the umeboshi helped sharpen the senses, that it was almost like a form of edible meditation. By forcing your entire face into a pucker, it reset the mind, cleared the fog, said, "Okay, champ, let's go not die today." That's what some of the old men say anyway. A rustle from the brush makes a few men reach for their hilts, but it's just a bird startled into flight, a white heron, graceful, untouchable, not at all stressed about sword fights or fermented fruit. You shake out your shoulders, roll your neck, and keep walking. The armor creaks softly with every step. A few other warriors reach into their pouches for one last bite of whatever they're carrying, but not you. That plum was plenty. For now. There's a small footbridge ahead, slung low across a narrow stream. You pass over it carefully, one plank at a time. The water below is dark and still. And even though you know you're surrounded by trained warriors, for a split second, you feel like you're the only person in the world. The only one awake. The only one who just finished the world's most aggressive fruit snack at 5 a.m. And in that moment, it kind of makes sense. The rituals, the traditions, the tiny things like one little plum that help you feel rooted, centered, ready. You catch up to the man in front of you, and he tilts his head slightly in greeting. You nod back, both of you silently acknowledging the worst of the morning is over. Now all you have to do is survive. Your tongue is still tingling from the sour, but your mind clear as the morning sky. The crunch of gravel fades as you settle into the steady rhythm of marching, armor rattling like distant wind chimes against your frame. That plum was only an overture, because now, finally, the smells wafting from someone's side pouch hit your nose, and your stomach immediately remembers it's got unmet expectations. There's something warm, faintly nutty, and somehow nostalgic in the air. You lift the bamboo lid of your bento case and find it. 2 triangular rice balls carefully wrapped in leaves, slightly smushed, but still intact. Onigiri. They're plain by today's standards, no spicy tuna or mayo drizzle here. Just sticky white rice, a whisper of salted fish in the center, and the faint earthy note of the leaf wrap. But when you're a foot soldier marching toward the possibility of being turned into tomorrow's kebab, a humble rice ball might as well be a 5-course feast. You peel back the wrapping with cold fingers, careful not to tear it. The rice is firm but yielding, cooked yesterday and pressed just hard enough to hold together without crumbling. You take a bite, and everything slows down. The starch calms the acidity from the plum, and for a few glorious seconds, there's only this: warm rice, salty edge, and the way your tongue chases the flavor like it's never had joy before. Mainstream historians agree that onigiri were a battlefield staple during the Kamakura and Muromachi periods. They traveled well, didn't spoil quickly, and could be made in massive batches by kitchen units the night before battle. Some versions were even grilled over low flame to form a smoky crust that kept the contents sealed longer. Soldiers stored them in bamboo tubes, paper parcels, or, for the particularly inventive, hollowed gourds. You glance around and see a dozen others doing the same thing. Some eating while walking, others crouched on rocks to savor theirs in stillness. One guy drops his and spends a solid 30 seconds deciding if it's still edible. Spoiler, it is. Rock rice counts as extra minerals. What's odd is how emotional something this simple can be. A little triangle of rice, a pinch of pickled plum or grilled salmon in the middle, and suddenly you're not a nameless warrior. You're someone's son, someone's brother, maybe someone's crush, though your helmet really kills the vibe. Historians still argue whether onigiri were considered sacred objects in wartime, symbolic of home, peace, or even luck. Some accounts say warriors would press their fingers into the rice to leave a wish before giving it to a loved one. Others say they just made them quickly and hoped they didn't get squashed in the bottom of a quiver. Either way, when you eat one, you feel like you're momentarily part of something ancient, soothing and edible. You finish one and tuck the other back in your pouch. Never eat all your carbs at once. That's ancient wisdom. A soft commotion ahead makes the line pause. Someone's tied their sandal strap too tight and is limping dramatically, like the rice balls betrayed them. Another soldier uses the moment to brag about how his mother folds hers into perfect triangles every time. He even claims she stamps them with little family crests made from toasted sesame. There is zero proof of this, and everyone is too tired to argue, but also too bored not to roll their eyes. Then, in one of those sleepy shifts of time only early morning brings, the trees part, and a clearing opens ahead. The smell of dew-soaked earth rises, and so does a murmur of shared relief. This is the halfway mark before the hill. You all know it. There's a boulder in the middle, blackened with old soot. Someone must have camped here before. You crouch next to it, the residual warmth from the sun still clinging to its surface. You retrieve the second onigiri its edges now soft from the pouch's humidity, and take another bite, slower this time. You hear a quiet voice say, "These things taste better the closer you get to dying." It's not grim, it's just a fact, floating in the morning air. Another voice answers, "No, they just taste better when someone else makes them." You don't say anything, but you agree. One scroll, barely surviving from the 16th century, includes a tiny ink sketch of a samurai holding an onigiri in one hand and a fan in the other, captioned, oddly, "Fortified from the east and the stomach." Scholars aren't entirely sure what it means, but you suspect it might be a pun. Or maybe someone was just bored during a very long march and felt poetic. You brush rice grains from your gloves, rise with a grunt, and sling your pack back over your shoulder. The squad moves again, slower now, but a little lighter. Someone hums a half-forgotten folk song under their breath. It gets stuck in your head instantly. You lick the last starch from your teeth and whisper a small thank you to the cook, wherever she is. Because in the end, it's not the steel that keeps you moving forward. It's the rice. The march continues, slower now, with the faintest golden sheen beginning to bloom across the horizon. Your armor warms slightly under the early sun, and your thoughts begin to drift, not towards swords or tactics or the captain's grumpy morning face, but toward one of the most delicious legends whispered in every half-serious barracks gathering, grilled eel. Unagi. The word alone feels indulgent. Smoky, rich, and just fatty enough to feel luxurious even when cooked over a makeshift twig fire. You don't have any in your pouch today, eels not exactly field rations, but your mind goes straight to that time in your training camp when the older soldiers passed around skewers fresh from the coals, char on the edges, sweet soy glaze barely clinging to the cracks. It was supposed to be for strength, but honestly, it was better than any motivational speech. Historical records confirm that unagi was prized during the Edo period, not just for taste, but for its supposed ability to restore energy, particularly in the heat of summer. And while we're still technically marching toward the battlefield, let's take a small mental detour into the mouth-watering. You imagine it now, a low fire pit dug in damp soil, fish sliced lengthwise and impaled neatly on thin bamboo skewers. One soldier tending the flame like it's a sacred duty, brushing the fish with a sauce made from soy, sugar, and a secret family ingredient no one's allowed to name. The meat hisses as it hits the heat. Smoke curls upward, not enough to give away your position, but enough to send every nearby stomach into a growling spiral. Historians still argue whether unagi was eaten before battle as a regular occurrence or whether it was a rare treat reserved for high-ranking samurai. Some claim it was part of midsummer rituals to cool the blood, despite being served hot. Others believe the tradition started earlier, tied to rural fishing villages where warriors returned for supplies, and maybe a taste of home. Either way, the effect is universal. You sit straighter just thinking about it. Saliva starts pooling before your brain even gives permission. One of your companions sighs aloud, almost theatrically. "Man, I could destroy a whole eel right now." Someone else groans. "Don't talk about food." You smirk quietly. The unspoken rule is everyone is hungry, all the time. But talking about specific delicious things during a long march is emotional sabotage. A guy behind you mutters, "My uncle swears he saw a general eat 2 skewers before a duel and win without blinking." Maybe the other guy just had bad eel, someone offers. You chuckle softly. These are the moments you remember, the small nonsense that fills the air between danger and duty. Everyone here is technically prepared to kill or be killed, but right now the more pressing issue is, grilled eel is not in your immediate future, and that's a tragedy. Up ahead, a break in the trees reveals a narrow stream, and just as you're thinking about fish again, a soldier veers off to check for fresh signs of wildlife, because sometimes, when the mood hits and the firewood is dry, someone actually does catch an eel. You pass a moss-covered rock where a soldier from another division once recited haiku about eel grease on his mustache. No one wrote it down, which is probably for the best. There's a fringe story in one battle account from 1574 where a young warrior allegedly refused to fight till he had his lucky skewer. His comrades thought he'd lost his mind, but when they humoured him and roasted a river eel right there, at the edge of the woods, he took one bite, nodded gravely, and proceeded to win 3 duels in a row. He later admitted he couldn't taste anything from nerves, but chewing helped me think. Fair enough. You reach the stream and crouch for a handful of cool water. It rushes between your fingers, icy and sharp. For a moment, your stomach forgets the eel and just savours the chill. Your reflection stares back, worn, dusty, a little sleepy-eyed, but solid. You rinse your hands and stand again. A buzz of cicadas starts in the trees. The kind that always means summer is really here. The kind that would have gone perfectly with skewers and stories if this weren't technically a war zone. You sling your canteen back over your shoulder and resume walking. The line is looser now, conversation is allowed, even encouraged, to keep the nerves from chewing holes in everyone's insides. A small game starts a few rows ahead. What would your last meal be? The usual answers fly by. Rice, miso soup, sake, a mountain of eel with no witnesses. Someone says, my last meal would be not dying. Fair. You think about it. What would you want? Not just before a fight, but before the world might go sideways. For you, it's easy. A hot skewer, sticky fingers, that smoky smell clinging to your sleeves for days. And maybe, if the gods were feeling generous, a clean square of cloth to wipe your mouth with afterward. You press forward, the trees closing in again. You're still marching towards something grim, but your mind is wrapped in a warm, savoury haze. And somewhere far away you can almost hear the crackle of a fire. There's a bend in the trail now, the kind where you can't see what's around the corner and probably don't want to. You adjust your pack, flex your fingers, and breathe through your nose, the scent of damp earth and pine weaving into your awareness like the opening line of a lullaby you half remember. And just as your thoughts begin to settle, a soft, warm scent curls through the air. Faint but unmistakable, roasted chestnuts. You pause slightly as if trying to catch the smell again. It's not real, not here, but the memory of it is strong enough to fool your senses. You've been here before. Different hill, different mission, same scent. Soldiers huddled around a campfire, passing around paper packets filled with the gently cracked nuts, the steam rising as cold fingers pry them open. Chestnuts were battlefield gold, not flashy, not preserved for decades, but comforting, earthy, the kind of snack you could warm up and share without ceremony. You remember squatting near the embers, eyes half closed, watching one older soldier methodically slice little X's into the shells with the point of his dagger before setting them in a wire basket over the flames. One popped loudly, everyone flinched, then laughed. Quiet laughter, low and warm, like the coals. Mainstream historical texts rarely mention roasted chestnuts as a primary war ration, but personal diaries and poems suggest otherwise. One 16th century foot soldier wrote, "The night was wet, the path uncertain, and the chestnut warm as a hand in mine." Romantic? Maybe. But you've been there. You get it. Historians still argue whether chestnuts were seen as morale food or if they were simply abundant and easy to roast. Either way, they were a favourite during colder campaigns, especially in the mountain passes where fires were both a blessing and a danger. You remember the ritual. Slice, roast, peel, eat, repeat. No conversation needed, just the sound of fire crackling, the faint pop of steam escaping the shell, and the occasional hiss of someone burning their fingers because they couldn't wait. You glance at the trees lining the trail now, and for a moment you imagine the same fires flickering just beyond the trunks. You almost feel the glow on your cheeks. One of your companions sidles up beside you and nudges your elbow. "Remember that time Kenta tried to roast chestnuts with his helmet?" You grin. "Yeah," and melted the lining. He still blames the fire. "It was the fire's fault," you say, deadpan. He snorts. That's the thing about chestnuts. They come with stories, not epic, sweeping war tales. Just little moments. Dumb grins, burned thumbs, shared warmth in otherwise uncomfortable places. There's a spot near a riverbank you passed last year where someone had carved a tiny chestnut into the bark of a pine tree. No words, just the shape. A quiet joke, a kind of edible graffiti. And you? You kept one in your pocket for weeks once. Not because it was your last snack, but because it reminded you of a night where everyone forgot just for a moment what they were doing out here. There's something meditative about peeling a roasted chestnut in silence. The way the shell comes away reluctantly, the nut steaming against your palm, soft and crumbly and sweet in that odd, subdued way. It doesn't try to impress you, it just is. A scholar once speculated that chestnuts in war were the food of temporary peace. A bite that required you to slow down, if only for a minute, to sit, to breathe, to peel. You believe that? Even now, the trail feels a little easier, just remembering it. Your fingers itch for something to hold, to warm. But all you have is the memory, and for now, that's enough. A call comes from ahead. A minor hill approaches. You sigh, not because of the climb, but because it means the quiet part of the morning is ending. Soon it'll be movement and signals and the crunch of strategy underfoot. You take a deep breath, the ghost of chestnut steam still lingering in your chest. You keep walking, because even if there's no fire now, no X-scored shells and no camaraderie in warm paper bags, there will be again. Somewhere, later, after this. After whatever this is, you just have to make it through. The incline begins gently, like it's trying to fool you into thinking this won't be a hassle. But your legs already know. They whisper little complaints with every step. Armor tugging against your knees, sweat gathering just behind your collar. You trudge in silence, but your mind is restless and hungry again. This time it drifts to a different kind of snack, one with fur, tusks, and a strong flavor that lingers long after the battle ends. Wild boar jerky. You didn't even like it the first time you had it. Too tough, too gamey, too chewy. It fought back, which, given its origin, made a certain ironic sense. But now you'd probably trade your spare pair of socks for a strip. Inoshishi jerky wasn't fancy. It was hacked from whatever could be trapped, smoked over hours, and dried until it could double as a roofing tile. But it lasted. It packed protein, and it reminded you of campfires and endurance, and the kind of men who wore scars like jewelry. Historians still argue whether wild boar was standard fare or battlefield luxury. Some clans hunted it as a rite of passage, others preserved it to reward the wounded or rank-and-file veterans. What's clear is that wherever forests were thick and soldiers were hungry, something wild and unfortunate ended up in a jerky bag. The most famous boar jerky reference comes from a 15th century general who supposedly refused all rations except his personal stash. He wrote, "If I am to die tomorrow, I prefer to chew something that once charged a hunter." A bit dramatic. Also, he lived to 68. You remember your first bite clearly. It was during winter drills when food was mostly rice and regrets. Someone passed you a scrap wrapped in old silk. You chewed it for 2 straight minutes before it broke down, but the flavor hit hard, deep, smoky, like bark and lightning. A lot of the younger warriors can't stand it. "It's like eating a grudge," one guy said, but the older ones nod when they chew, eyes narrowing with memories. The joke goes, if you can't cut a boar with your blade, chew one into submission. You grin just thinking about it. The trail steepens and someone groans theatrically. Another replies, "Should have packed more meat." You don't say anything, but your hand brushes your pouch, just to check, just in case. You don't have jerky, but you do have a flat cake of pressed rice and fish flakes. It's dry, it tastes like desperation, but it gets the job done. You nibble and think about how jerky was often stored in sleeves or even helmet linings. One guy once tried to dry it on his backplate, claiming it absorbed the spirit of war. He also passed out from heat stroke, so maybe not the best method. There's a sharp curve ahead where the path narrows between two boulders. You squeeze through sideways, boots scraping the gravel, and emerge to a wide view, hills rolling away in soft shades of green and grey. Mist clings to the treetops like forgotten laundry. It's beautiful, which is always slightly unnerving. You take a moment, just one, to rest against a tree. Your breathing slows. The others are close by, some munching, some dozing upright, with their eyes half open like seasoned cats. You reach into your pouch again, still no jerky. Just another memory. One of the best stories you ever heard came from a retired archer who claimed he shot a boar with an arrow tipped in plum vinegar just to tenderize it early. No one believed him, but you wanted to believe him. You'd like to think that boar snacks were more than food, that they meant something, that when you bite into something tough, a creature that once fought tooth and tusk, you absorb a bit of its stubbornness, that maybe, just maybe, it sticks with you. You take one last bite of your rice cake, let it dissolve slowly, then you rise, your legs ache, your armor chafes, and your stomach is still low-key disappointed, but your mouth remembers the chew of old jerky, your body remembers the warmth of those nights, and as the sun rises higher, and the captain calls the column to shape again, you whisper to yourself, next time, definitely bringing boar. The path winds downward now, soft and mossy underfoot, the kind of ground that muffles footsteps and invites silence. You're thankful for it, not just because your knees are mildly furious about the last incline, but because you need the quiet. You're approaching the outer ridge of the field, and beyond that, well, the part of the morning where things stop being about snacks and start being about steel. But just before the final rise, someone ahead pauses and raises a hand. You all stop instinctively. No danger, just a clearing. And in that clearing, a tiny cluster of warriors, cross-legged, cups in hand, steam curls upward from a kettle slung over a makeshift fire pit. And even from this distance, the floral note hits you. Sakura tea, you don't even realize you're smiling until someone nudges you from behind. Go on, he says, pretend you don't care. You don't pretend. You walk toward it. Cherry blossom tea isn't strong, not in taste or aroma. It's gentle, subtle, like drinking memory. Salt-pickled sakura petals soaked in hot water, usually with a faint trace of plum vinegar or rice wine. And when you're drinking it in full armor, with your sword leaning against your shin and your nerves jangling like loose coins, it feels like the most rebellious act imaginable. You accept a wooden cup from one of the younger soldiers by the fire. He nods politely, like he's handing you a sacred scroll, not a floral infusion. The steam fogs your nose and the warmth seeps into your fingers like medicine. One sip, and everything softens. Historians agree that Sakuryu was often served at weddings and formal events, not on battlefields, which is exactly why it became so beloved in war camps, especially among samurai with a poetic streak. It was a reminder that beauty existed, that seasons continued, that the same tree blooming in your cup might be blooming in your hometown. Historians still argue whether Sakura tea had any medicinal value or was purely symbolic. One 15th century medical text claims it calmed the spirit and steadied the hand. Another dismisses it as fancy water for anxious nobles. But sitting here, sipping slowly, you don't care. It works. Beside you, someone mutters, "Tastes like leaves." Another replies, "Good. Means we're still human." You glance around. Half the men are quiet. The other half are writing. Seriously, someone's scratching haiku onto a scrap of bark. Another's whispering a tanka under his breath. This always happens. Give a samurai hot tea and the scent of blossoms, and suddenly he's a poet. You resist the urge to compose something yourself. Barely. The best part? No one talks tactics during Sakura tea. It's like a spell. The captain himself once declared, "Any man who discusses formations during flower tea will be reassigned to the latrine detail." That man understood serenity. You finish your cup slowly, letting the last sip sit on your tongue. It tastes faintly of salt and spring, like rain that fell in another life. There's a gentle rustle and the group begins to rise. The fire's already being smothered with earth. Someone crushes a petal between his fingers and lets it fall. You return the cup with a nod and the young soldier beams like you've knighted him. You step back onto the trail, lighter somehow. There's an old tale of a general who delayed a skirmish by 2 hours because he insisted on finishing his Sakura tea ritual. His soldiers were furious until they discovered the delay helped them avoid a trap. He claimed it was intuition. Others say it was indigestion. Either way, the tea won. As you walk, the path narrows again. Branches scrape gently against your sleeves, and petals, real ones, not pickled, begin to fall. Early bloomers, they drift onto your shoulders, your helmet. You don't brush them off. Sakura tea doesn't last long in the mouth. But its quiet does. You're calm now. Not because you've forgotten where you're going, but because you've remembered where you are. And even if the next moment is chaos, for now, it is still tea time. The petals taper off as you move farther along the ridge, replaced by the musky scent of soil, and something sharper, funkier. It hits you before you see it, an unmistakable tang that settles somewhere between wet socks and ancient cheese. Pickled daikon, takwan, you find the source without even trying. A few soldiers are gathered off the main trail, sitting on their haunches, chewing solemnly on thin slices of the neon-yellow radish, passing a wrapped bundle from hand to hand like a sacred scroll that smells like feet. One offers you a piece with a grin. You hesitate, but only out of politeness. You know exactly what it tastes like. You've had it a dozen times before. You pop a slice into your mouth. Crunch! The texture is the best part. Crisp, cold from the morning air, and just sour enough to bite back. The flavor? Well, let's say it grows on you, over time. In about 10 years, takwan was everywhere in samurai camps. Pressed, pickled, bundled in cloth. It was the background actor of the battlefield snack world. Not glamorous, not poetic, but always there. It was the sidekick to rice balls, the tangy intermission between mouthfuls of miso or jerky. Sometimes, when rations were scarce, it was the main course. Historians agree that daikon, especially when pickled into takwan, was one of the most common preserved vegetables in feudal Japan. Easy to grow, easy to store, and most importantly, nearly impossible to ruin. Some batches were aged for months in barrels lined with rice bran and salt. Others were buried in the ground and left to ferment until they nearly achieved sentience. Historians still argue whether samurai liked takwan or merely tolerated it. Some scrolls praise its bracing effect on the palate. Others call it a punishment disguised as food. One diary from a junior officer in the 1500s reads, "I dreamt of home and awoke to daikon. Life is balance." You chew slowly, letting the sour spread through your mouth like a controlled explosion. Around you, others make similar faces. No one pretends to love it, but no one complains either. It's not a treat, it's a signal. Takwan means it's almost time. There's something ritualistic about the moment. You're not just sharing a snack, you're reminding your body what comes next. Crunch, swallow, breathe, tighten your armor straps, recheck your scabbard. One last slice. It's a rhythm as old as war. A soldier beside you chuckles.
My grandfather said...
And father said daikon makes your spirit sour enough to scare away arrows. You nod. Then I'm practically invincible. He holds up the last slice. For luck. You both crunch in sync. It echoes, weirdly satisfying. You've heard stories of entire units carrying personal daikon bundles tied to their belts, not for food, but for comfort. Something to touch before a charge, something to suck on if wounded, a pungent talisman. Some even believed the smell itself repelled evil spirits, which, given how strong it is, seems plausible. Ghosts probably took one whiff and decided to haunt someone more fragrant. You tuck the leftover slice into your pouch. It'll come in handy later, maybe after the fight, maybe when you're hiding behind a tree trying not to vomit from adrenaline. The trail narrows again, winding through brush thick with spider webs and old tree roots. Every step feels heavier now, not just from the slope, but from the invisible weight pressing in. You're close. You hear someone mutter, "This part always feels too quiet." Another replies, "Too loud after this." You keep walking. The Takuan sits like a little sun in your stomach, bright and weird and oddly reassuring, like a stubborn part of you refusing to be nervous. You remember one tale, possibly exaggerated, of a lone scout who survived an ambush because he slipped on a piece of pickled radish and fell down a slope, avoiding the enemy completely. When they found him, he was dazed, muddy, and still chewing. You hope it's true. You pass under a low branch, the leaves brushing your helmet with a whisper. The path ahead curves once more, and you sense it. The last bend before the world opens wide and everything changes. You pause, not for breath, not for fear, but to take one final bite. Crunch. It starts as a faint scent clinging to your fingers, a whisper of something sticky, pungent, and oddly nutty. You glance down at your hand, remembering the last thing you touched, not your sword, not your pouch, natto, fermented soybeans. You didn't even eat any, just helped a fellow soldier open his tightly wrapped leaf bundle, and the smell practically claimed squatter's rights under your fingernails. That's the thing about natto. It doesn't need your permission. It just is. The texture? Sticky, slimy, rope-like threads stretch from bean to bean like they've been spun by culinary spiders. The taste? Debatable. The effect? Powerful. Your stomach flips slightly at the memory. You've never really decided if you like natto or just respect it for surviving as long as it has. But among samurai, it had a reputation. Packed with protein, lightweight, and impossible to confuse with anything else, natto was the emergency fuel of choice, especially when rice was scarce and dried fish started to feel like punishment. Soldiers often carried it wrapped in straw or stuffed into tiny gourd flasks. Some ate it cold, others heated it by tucking the packet under their armor while they marched, letting body heat do the work. You glance behind you. Sure enough, someone's fiddling with a cloth packet, strings of natto clinging to his chopsticks in long, unholy strands. "You want some?" he asks. You shake your head quickly. "I'm good." He shrugs. "More for me." You'll regret it when your sword arm gives out. You probably will, but for now you're not feeling brave enough to eat something that looks like it might fight back. Historians agree natto was eaten during military campaigns as early as the Heian period. There's even speculation that it was first discovered because of warfare, a batch of boiled soybeans accidentally left in a straw bag for days while a cavalry unit was on the move. When they opened it, surprise, goo. Historians still argue whether samurai genuinely enjoyed it or merely endured it. Some sources claim it enhanced stamina and mental focus. Others say it was a rite of passage. If you can eat this and keep marching, you can survive anything. One poem, scrawled on a strip of bamboo, reads, "Threads of the bean. Cling like thoughts I cannot shake, bitter but faithful." You assume the poet had mixed feelings. You trudge onward, the scent of natto still ghosting behind you, somehow stronger than the morning mist. And as gross as it sometimes feels, there's something admirable about a food that doesn't apologize. It's honest, no illusions, just fermented persistence, like many things in war. The man behind you slurps his last bite and sighs contentedly. "Tastes like confidence," he mutters. You don't reply. You're too busy wiping phantom natto strands from your palms, even though there's nothing there. You remember a captain once saying that natto was the food equivalent of battle nerves. It sticks, it stinks, and it gets everywhere, but somehow it helps you push through. The trail begins to level out. Ahead, the forest thins. Your pace slows with the rest of the group, not because you're tired, but because the air's changed. There's a charge to it now, a tension that slides down your spine like cold rain. Someone taps your shoulder. 10 minutes, they say. Then we break into position. You nod, throat dry. But somewhere deep in your gut, the ghost of fermented beans coils like a dare. You might not have eaten it. but natto has touched you today, quite literally. You exhale, adjust your armor, and think, maybe tomorrow. Maybe if you survive. You'll give it a real try. You're still tracing the scent trail of that phantom natto when the path shifts again, no longer dirt, but stones smoothed by centuries of boots and weather. And with it, another texture enters your awareness, a soft crunch beneath your soles. You glance down, pine needles, old, dry, fragrant. That's when you remember pine nuts, tiny, slippery, shockingly oily for their size and coveted like gold during long marches through forest terrain. You smile because these weren't rationed officially, these were scavenged, earned. A snack for those with sharp eyes and the patience to crack them open with teeth or stones, or if you were really desperate, with the heel of your boot. You once watched a soldier pick a dozen from a squirrel's abandoned stash and treat them like sacred offerings. You also watched him fail to open 6 of them and mutter curses against all trees. Pine nuts weren't exactly fuel, they were too small for that. But in the middle of a long climb, when your rice was gone and your jerky had turned into a dry riddle, they were hope in a shell. Historians agree that samurai on the move often supplemented their rations with foraged goods, pine nuts, chestnuts, wild greens. These weren't just snacks, they were contingency plans. One military diary from 1578 includes a tiny side note. Pine nuts found on the South Ridge lifted mood considerably. That's the kind of food review you don't forget. Historians still argue whether soldiers were formally taught foraging or just learned from veterans and common sense. There's evidence of manuals written for survival in the wilderness, but also plenty of jokes about officers accidentally eating poisonous berries for honor. You crouch briefly and run your gloved fingers along a low-hanging branch. No nuts, not in season, but the smell is there, faint resin and cool sap, and it triggers the memory of a shared handful passed around a campfire like contraband. There's something communal about cracking pine nuts. It takes too long to hoard them. You always end up passing some around, especially if you're bad at opening them and hoping someone else has stronger teeth. You remember one scout who carried a little pouch sewn into his belt, filled with nothing but pine nuts and dried orange peel. He'd pull them out when morale dipped and say, "I don't fight well on an empty mood." Everyone thought he was ridiculous. Everyone also waited for their turn. The path dips again, descending into a ravine, thick with shadow and birdsong. You move more carefully here. Pine roots twist underfoot like lazy snakes. Someone behind you slips and mutters a colourful phrase involving ancestors and gravity. At the bottom, a clearing opens up. Sunlight filters through in dappled streaks. A few warriors break formation briefly to kneel and dig in the soft ground. They're not looking for treasure, they're looking for lunch. You spot one of them smiling. He holds up a pine cone like a trophy. "Still sticky," he says. "Good sign." You shake your head, but there's warmth in your chest. These moments, these tiny scavenger hunts, matter more than they should. Because pine nuts aren't just food, they're something else. A reminder that even surrounded by death, a forest can still give. That if you're quiet, patient, and willing to get sticky fingers, the world might still offer you something small and good. You pass through the clearing, the scent of pine thick and sweet now. Someone tosses you a half-open cone. You catch it one-handed. Inside, one seed glints like a sliver of sunlight. You pop it into your mouth. Soft crunch, butter slick flavor. You smile. Just one, but enough. The sun hangs a little higher now, its warmth filtering down in waves that turn your armor into a personal oven. You roll your shoulders, shift your weight, and try not to think about how many more hours you'll be marinating in your own sweat. But distraction, as always, comes in the form of food, or more precisely, memory. Because somewhere in the back of your mind, a campfire crackles to life. And with it, salted persimmons. Sweet, wrinkled, dusted with salt, and just chewy enough to make your jaw do a bit of extra work, these were the dessert no one admitted they liked. And also the first thing to vanish from every ration pile. You remember the last time you had one. It was after nightfall, with a fire burning low and bellies too full of barley to feel comfortable. Someone had a hidden stash, 4 perfectly dried hoshigaki still tied with twine and slightly sticky from travel. The whole squad fell silent as he unwrapped them, reverent as priests. The first bite was always a surprise. The salt hits first, sharp, jarring, then fades into the soft, syrupy sweetness of the dried fruit. Your teeth sink into it slowly, almost respectfully. It tastes like fall, like wood smoke and cold mornings and letters from home. Historians agree that dried persimmons were a common luxury food among warriors, preserved for long campaigns, gifted before partings, and often packed by mothers and wives who understood better than the soldiers themselves that sweetness, in small doses, could save a spirit. Historians still argue whether the salting was for preservation, taste, or superstition. One account claims salted persimmons warded off fevers and evil dreams. Another says it simply made them last longer in the bottom of a musty pack. Either way, the result is the same, a treat disguised as medicine, or maybe the other way around. As you walk, you find yourself reaching toward your hip pouch, not because you packed any, but because your hands remember the motion. Untying the knot, peeling back the cloth, feeling that unmistakable give of the fruit's soft skin. Someone near you sighs audibly. "I'd kill for something sweet." Another replies, "I've got dried sardines." Those are not sweet. They are if you have no standards. A ripple of tired laughter rolls through the group. Then, as if summoned by the conversation, a small cluster of soldiers up ahead begins swapping trail rations, and one of them, blessed by the gods of foresight, pulls out 2 salted persimmons wrapped in rice paper. You watch as they're passed hand to hand, little orange comets streaking through the ranks. You don't get one, but the smell floats back anyway. That faint caramel note, that ghost of autumn. And with it comes something else, a sound you know well, a story, softly spoken, barely more than a whisper. And then the ghost appeared right by the persimmon tree, still holding her baby. You don't turn to look. You've heard this one. Everyone has. There's something about sweet food and ghost stories that pair naturally. Maybe because both sneak up on you. Maybe because soldiers need contrast, the light and the dark, the sweet and the eerie, to stay human in the spaces between fights. One voice keeps telling the tale, low and steady as you walk. It's a classic. The young woman who died waiting for her husband's return, her spirit now lingering under the fruit trees, searching for warmth, for answers, for someone to finish her meal. You glance at the trees to your left, thin, leafless, bark mottled with lichen. No ghosts, but you don't linger. Salted persimmons always brought the old stories out. Something about their softness, their silence. They were the kind of snack that made men talk, or confess, or remember. You had a friend once, short, serious, always polishing his blade like it owed him money. He never told stories, except once, late one autumn, when he had a persimmon in his hand and a distant look in his eye. He said, "My brother used to throw these at me when we argued." You asked what happened to his brother. He said, "Still throws 'em, just in my dreams." You both laughed. You both fell quiet. You still remember the way he peeled that persimmon, slow and careful, like it was breakable. You never saw him again. Up ahead, the path turns rocky. A sign you're close. The field is near. The break is ending, but in your mind, the fire still crackles. The ghost still waits under her tree. And a salted persimmon, half eaten, still rests in someone's cloth-wrapped palm. You keep walking. No snack this time, but the taste lingers. The terrain shifts again, less forest now, more scrub and low stones, where the wind moves differently. It whistles here, slipping between your armor plates, sneaking under your collar. The scent of pine and salt and ghost stories fades, replaced by something simpler. Fish. More specifically, river fish, grilled, skewered, and still flaking from heat you can almost feel against your lips. You remember it vividly. One stream, one campfire, and one catch, small but fresh, shimmering in the light just moments before someone speared it with a sharpened twig. No seasoning, no sauce, no fanfare, just caught, cleaned, and charred until the skin blistered and curled away like paper. You'd had your doubts, it looked too small to satisfy, but one bite in, and you understood. Grilled riverfish was a gift, not because it was rare, but because it required patience and opportunity. You had to find it, catch it, cook it. In war, that kind of luxury was almost absurd. Most meals didn't need fire or flavor, they needed portability, longevity, chew resistance, but this was different. Historians agree that small stream fish, particularly ayu and ayunoko, were part of traditional samurai diets, especially during spring and early summer campaigns. A skilled soldier could catch them with a net, a stick, or even his bare hands if he didn't mind getting soaked. Historians still argue whether the practice was strategic, to boost morale, ritualistic, to honor the land, or just a break from stale rice. One scroll describes a daimyo who insisted his men eat fresh fish before every major charge. He believed the shine of the fish's scales brought good luck. His enemies might have disagreed. You snap out of your thoughts as the trail leads you along the edge of a shallow ravine. A trickle of water murmurs below. Your eyes scan the surface out of habit, and there, movement, flashing silver under ripples. You stop. It's absurd, but your hand itches for a stick. You picture it, slipping down the embankment, holding your breath, lunging forward with a practiced flick, and hauling up a fish, small and furious, to roast on a branch. It wouldn't take long, but today's not that day. You settle for watching. The group moves ahead, chatter low, feet dragging slightly. Everyone's thinking the same thing. We're close to the field, close to the point where food stops mattering. Still, you remember how the best fires weren't the ones built for warmth, or even for light. They were the ones for cooking fish. Bent twigs holding fillets over slow coals, smoke curling into the sky like prayer. One soldier you knew could gut a fish with 2 fingers and a rock. He never bragged about it. He just did it, quietly, and always smiled afterward. Claimed it reminded him of when life was smaller, when being useful was enough. He used to say, "Catch a fish, eat a fish. Remember you're not just a sword. It's stuck with you." You remember crouching beside a creek once, biting into a freshly grilled trout, still hot enough to scald your tongue, and thinking, "This is the most human I've felt in weeks. Even now, the memory makes your mouth water." There's something about fish that forces you to slow down. You can't rush it. You can't ignore the bones. You have to pay attention. That's rare out here. Too rare. You move on, the sound of water fading behind you. The ravine bends away, swallowed by trees and time. But in your mind, there's still a fire. There's still a fish, just barely done, the skin crackling where the flame kissed it. And for a heartbeat, you feel full. Not fed, exactly, just full. Like maybe something still fits in this world besides armor and orders. You breathe it in, slow and grateful. Then you walk on, you're climbing again. Nothing too steep, just the kind of incline that whispers its intentions to your calves and lower back. The earth here is dry and packed, the air warmer, and the sunlight starts to reflect off the edges of your gear. A flicker of gold on steel, a glint here, a shimmer there. It's oddly cheerful for a place like this. But what really grabs your attention now is the sound. Not of footsteps or blades or distant orders, but of something crinkling. Paper? No, something thinner, drier, crisp. Nori, dried seaweed. The man walking just ahead of you reaches into his sleeve and pulls out a curled sheet of it. Not wrapped around rice, not fancy, just a plain rectangle of salty green-black umami folded like a secret message. He tears off a piece and munches quietly. You stare for a moment too long. He notices. He holds out the rest. You take it without speaking. It crumbles gently in your fingers and melts on your tongue in a burst of ocean and salt. It's paper-thin, almost insubstantial, but carries the taste of an entire coastline. This is the battlefield snack that never gets enough credit. Not hearty, not filling, but it slips into places no rice ball or jerky could, in scrolls, inside helmets, between the pages of your personal poems if you were that kind of soldier. Historians agree that nori was used regularly in military rations by the Edo period, though early versions were thicker, darker, and often tougher. The thinnest sheets, the ones that snap just right between your teeth, came later, when monks began refining the drying process using paper-making techniques. Historians still argue whether soldiers ate it for nutrition or nostalgia. The sea was home for many, home, or at least the last place they saw someone smile without armor. One poem carved into a bamboo case read, "Salt wind, black tide, a page of sea in my hands, I chew my father's voice." You chew, slowly, letting the taste linger. There's something about nori that always surprises you. It seems so fragile, so forgettable. But one bite, and it floods your senses. The crunch, the salt, the hint of iron beneath the brine. A bite of sea, carried far inland. Your companion clears his throat. Kept that since last month. You raise your brows. Still good. Like me, he says with a smirk. You snort past the rest of the sheet back. He waves it off. All yours.
I packed spares. A luxury. You fold the remaining half carefully and
fully and slip it into your pouch, not because you need it right now, but because you will. You always do. There's a moment of stillness as you crest the hill. The wind shifts, carries the scent of dry grass and dust, and faintly, still, that ocean kiss from the nori. You remember once watching a younger recruit try to toast his seaweed over a campfire. The whole thing burst into flame. He cried over it. It was his mother's last gift before deployment. Someone shared theirs with him. No one said a word. It was the quietest moment of that entire month. Seaweed teaches humility, a monk once told you. It dissolves in your mouth like memory. You didn't understand that back then. You do now. You reach the top and pause. The valley stretches below, deceptively peaceful. Shadows move across the grass like slow ghosts. It won't be long now, but for this breath, this step, you're still a man with seaweed in his mouth, not a soldier with steel in his hand. You chew. You swallow. You walk on. The hill descends into a wide, flat plain where the grass grows tall and stubborn. Your boots push through it with a soft shush, shush, like paper whispers. The squad spreads slightly now, the tight column loosening as everyone senses the transition. This is the staging area. No more winding trails, no more branches catching on sleeves, just open ground and an open sky above it. And then you hear it, not a bird, not the wind, a crack, sharp, dry, familiar, senbei. Rice crackers. Someone a few paces over is munching like they've got all the time in the world, sitting cross-legged on a rock, an oversized cracker in both hands. He breaks it with a dramatic snap, takes a bite, and lets out a satisfied mmm that's half joke, half gospel truth. Your stomach perks up immediately. Senbei come in many forms, sweet, salty, glazed with soy sauce or coated in nori. Some are thin and delicate, others thick and rugged like roof tiles. The ones carried to war were usually the latter, dense, dry, loud, the kind of food that announces itself with every chew. You find a small pouch in your own bag, pull out a half-broken cracker wrapped in waxed paper. You tap the edge gently, still crisp. You bite. And it sounds like thunder in your skull. Totally not stealthy, not even a little, but satisfying, absolutely. Historians agree that senbei were a beloved travel snack by the late medieval period, particularly in eastern provinces where rice farming and open-air drying made them easy to produce in bulk. They could last for months, held up to rough weather, and best of all, they doubled as morale boosters. Historians still argue whether senbei were considered fighting food or comfort food. One text from a foot soldier described it as the sound of courage in your mouth. Another simply called it a chewable reason to stay sane. You eat slowly, enjoying the rhythm of it. Crunch, breathe, crunch. There's a kind of meditative quality in eating something so loud in such a quiet place. A group nearby starts swapping snacks. Someone throws a senbei like a frisbee. Another parries it mid-air with the flat of his blade. "Battle training," he says, deadpan. The rest chuckle. You sit down on a rock and listen to the mix of silence and slow munching. A strange symphony of crackling crackers and creaking armor. It shouldn't work, but it does. You remember the time someone replaced a friend's entire pouch of senbei with fakes made of dried mud. Realistic, perfectly glazed with soy, but still mud. The friend didn't notice until he bit down and cracked a tooth. There were no confessions, only a shared glance and the understanding that war is hard, but pranks are sacred. Another tale floats back. One of those possibly true, probably exaggerated stories about a warrior who used a stack of senbei as makeshift armor padding. They say a stray arrow hit him in the side, shattered the cracker, and left him with nothing but bruises and a snack for later. You believe it, sort of. You finish your cracker and brush the crumbs from your gloves. The salt still tingles on your lips. Your jaw feels a little worked over. These things never go down easy. But that's the point. They make you do something. Engage, grind, focus, just like the day ahead. You rise and stretch. Across the field, a lieutenant is checking his scrolls. Another group is assembling spears. Someone's oiling a blade with quiet reverence. The mood shifts again, but you still hear it. One last crack of a senbei snapping in half, bold and bright in the morning air. And it sounds, strangely, like confidence, like defiance, like a toast without words. The sun's stronger now, not aggressive, just persistent, pressing down on your shoulders, wrapping your skin in warmth you'll definitely regret later. The armor's heating up, your undershirt's sticking, and your thoughts floating, drifting from cracked rice crackers to something softer, stickier, and unexpectedly crucial to the day's survival. Mochi. Not the cute kind dusted in sugar and served with tea. No, this is war mochi, dense, unsweetened, and packed like bricks into pouches, carried by runners too young to shave and too fast for common sense. You once asked a messenger how many miles he could run on a single mochi cake. He shrugged and said, "Oh, depends if I'm being chased," then grinned and vanished into the trees. You smile, remembering that. You never saw him tired. Mochi on the battlefield wasn't a treat. It was fuel. A single square could keep you going for hours, sometimes flavored with sesame or bean paste, sometimes just plain rice pounded until it forgot it used to be anything else. Today, tucked into the crook of your belt, is a tightly wrapped hunk of mochi. You pull it out now, peeling the wax cloth slowly. It's soft but solid, cool from the morning air, and slightly tacky to the touch. You take a bite. It resists, then yields, smooth, heavy, satisfying. You chew slowly. It sits in your mouth like something permanent, something committed. Historians agree that mochi was used by both warriors and messengers during long campaigns favored for its calorie density and portability. It could be steamed, dried, or even fire-roasted into a crispy shell, though the field version was usually raw, chewy, and sometimes a little too honest about its shelf life. Historians still argue whether mochi had spiritual significance on the battlefield or simply represented convenience. Some sources describe soldiers eating it before battle as a blessing. Others mention mochi shaped like animals, symbols of strength or agility. One record claims a scout once carved a lucky kanji into his mochi before every mission and returned alive 12 times. You take another bite. This one's plain, just pounded rice, but it fills your mouth like a promise. Simple, unshakable. Nearby, a few younger soldiers are sharing theirs, trading bites like kids at a festival. One has mochi with red bean paste. He offers a corner to a friend who tries to act unimpressed, fails completely, and devours it. Too sweet for battle, someone teases. Too good to save, the other replies. You chuckle. That's the thing with mochi. It holds weight, not just physically, but emotionally. It's compact comfort. One little reminder that softness still exists in a world designed to be sharp. You glance down at your own, just a bit left. You think about saving it, but you finish it, because there's something bold about eating the whole thing, something final. There's a tale, half legend, half joke, of a runner who tripped during a charge, dropped his mochi, and refused to move until he found it. They say he crawled across the field with arrows flying overhead, found his snack lodged between two rocks, and grinned like he'd won a duel. That man, the story goes, lived to 100. No one knows his name. Everyone knows his hunger. You stand up, slowly, the last of the rice sticking to your molars. Your stomach feels ready now, not full exactly, but grounded. And maybe that's what mochi does best. It doesn't thrill, it doesn't dazzle, but it stays with you, fills the corners, gives you something to chew while the world decides what happens next. A horn sounds faintly in the distance, one long note drawn out. You stretch your neck, roll your shoulders. The runners are lining up now, lean and quiet, eyes sharp, and every one of them chewing. You watch the runners disappear into the trees like spirits, slim silhouettes with bound hair, light packs, and the rhythm of full stomachs. Their mochi will carry them miles, probably farther than common sense would advise. You don't envy them, but you do admire them. Moving that fast with no armor, no backup, just rice cakes and messages clutched to their chests. That's a different kind of bravery. Your own steps are slower now. Not because you're tired, but because you're thinking about something stranger, slipperier. Yamaimo, mountain yam, not glamorous, not portable, certainly not the kind of thing you expect to crave while gearing up for a potential stabbing. But somehow, the memory surfaces, thick, gooey, and weirdly energizing. Raw, grated yamaimo is let's call it polarizing. It's slimy. It sticks to chopsticks like regret. It slides across your tongue in a way that makes you question your life choices. But according to every old man in every village, it restores the spirit and lubricates the bones. Not scientifically verified, but hard to argue with when you're too winded to climb another hill and someone offers you a tiny clay bowl of the stuff. You remember sitting beside a fire years ago, while a quartermaster mashed yamaimo into a pot with salted broth and a handful of shredded daikon. It looked like boiled ghosts, tasted like earth and mucus, and yet you felt incredible after. Historians agree that mountain yam was part of the samurai diet, especially in mountainous campaigns where other root vegetables struggled to grow. High in starch and stubbornness, it kept men moving longer than expected, despite its slimy personality. Historians still argue whether it was revered as medicine, tolerated as fuel, or feared as nature's prank. One 16th century scroll includes a recipe that simply reads, "Grate the yam, swallow quickly, do not breathe through nose." You chuckle at the memory. The consistency is still stuck in your memory, like emotional sap. Soldiers often joked that if you could keep Yamaimo down, you could probably win any fight. It was less a food than a dare. You check your pouch, not that you'd bring yam paste into a potential skirmish. It doesn't travel well, and it makes everything else in your bag feel uncomfortable. But still, your muscles remember it. The slight jolt of stamina, the weird clarity that followed the swallow. One of your squad mates glances over and says, "You ever try drinking Tororo right before a duel?" You blink. "Why would I ever do that to myself?" He shrugs. "Slipped during the draw, got lucky. Sword went right under the guy's block." "So you won?" "No, I threw up, but he slipped on it and broke his ankle." You laugh harder than you should. It's the kind of ridiculous story that feels both untrue and completely possible. There's even a rumor, definitely exaggerated, that a famous general once demanded Yamaimo before every major decision. "To remind me that discomfort leads to clarity," he supposedly said. More likely, he just had a robust stomach. A breeze picks up. carries dust and the faint scent of old fields and coming noise. You keep walking, but slower now. Every step is measured. The group is no longer marching, they're drifting into formation, loose, quiet, waiting for the first call. You glance down the hill where the trail vanishes into a grove of reeds. This is where it happens. The last lull, the last chew, the last weird yam-based anecdote before the day turns sharp. You remember the last time you had Yamaimo. It was raining, you were cold, and someone handed you a bowl with a wink saying, "This one's from the mountain gods, they'll forgive your complaints." You didn't complain, you also didn't ask what else was in it, but you made it through that night. And maybe that's the point. Yamaimo isn't pleasant, but neither is today. You flex your fingers, roll your shoulder blades. The paste memory sticks in your throat like a phantom texture. You don't have any in your bag, but you carry it anyway. The reeds part without warning, swaying gently as you pass through, tall enough to brush your shoulders and murmur against your ears. It's cooler here, shaded. The sunlight filters through in streaks, dappling your path with patches of gold and green. For a moment, it feels like you've stepped into another world. Quieter, softer. Even the birds hold their breath. And in this hush, a smell rises, earthy, bitter, slightly sour. Dandelion greens, not glamorous, not filling, and absolutely not part of any noble feast. Yet here they are, etched into your memory like a forgotten folk song. Wilted, boiled, sometimes steamed, if someone had enough patience, and a clean pot. Tossed in a wooden bowl with salt and vinegar, and maybe a splash of miso. If the cook was feeling generous, you've eaten worse, much worse. The thing about battlefield Nanakusa, wild greens, herbs, things that grow stubbornly between rocks, is that they didn't ask to be eaten. They weren't cultivated or pampered. They were survivors, just like you. And when the rice ran out, or the fish spoiled, or the jerky began to taste like regret, you turned to the ground and hoped something edible was growing there. Dandelion was the best of the bunch. Historians agree that field greens played a crucial role in the diet of common foot soldiers, especially in drawn-out campaigns where supplies ran low or enemy blockades cut off trade. Dandelions, clover, burdock root, bitter but safe, became soup fillers, rice ball extenders, and sometimes even standalone meals. Historians still argue whether the reliance on wild greens was a sign of discipline, desperation, or both. One monk's journal notes that eating dandelion before a skirmish was a reminder of humility. Another warrior's letter home simply said, "It tastes like the bottom of a field, but it works." You remember crouching beside a battered pot, watching a soldier in mud-streaked robes stir a handful of wilted greens into cloudy water. No fire, just heat from a sun-warmed rock and the sheer willpower to make something out of nothing. He handed you a ladleful with a solemn nod, as if giving you a family heirloom. It was terrible, but it was hot, and it was green. And your body said thank you. You step into a clearing now, the reeds thinning into open space. A group of men are huddled over a dented iron pot, steam rising from the lid. You can already tell it's vegetable-based. You can smell the bitterness. It wafts over the grass like a rumour. Someone ladles a portion into a chipped bowl. Another peels a chunk of stale rice ball from a pocket and crumbles it on top like garnish. They eat quietly, reverently. No one talks about taste, only temperature. You join them. Someone offers you a flat wooden spoon. You scoop and sip. It's familiar, sharp, faintly metallic from the pot, earthy from the greens. There's something about it that scrapes your throat going down. Not unpleasant, just real. It tastes like waking up in the mud and knowing you still have one more day in you. You chew slowly. There's a superstition among certain northern units that dandelion soup consumed before battle grounds the soul, makes you less likely to panic. One commander was famous for making his whole unit drink it every morning, saying, "If you can handle this, you can handle anything." He died of dysentery, but the tradition lived on. You finish the bowl and hand it back. No thanks needed. Just a quiet nod, a flick of the fingers, and then back to silence. A breeze stirs the grass. You remember once spotting a dandelion patch just off the edge of a trail, bright yellow blooms nodding like tiny suns. The medic trailing behind you dove straight in, pulling handfuls with joy in his eyes. You asked, "Isn't that the stuff from last night's stew?" He replied, "Yep, but this batch looks less angry." You'd laughed. Later that night, the new stew tasted exactly the same, but still less angry. Now, as the sky stretches overhead, clear and vast, you feel it again, that odd clarity that comes from eating something wild and bitter and absolutely necessary. You're not full, but you're steady. You wipe your mouth, brush grass from your sleeve, adjust your grip on the hilt at your side. The meal is over, but the roots are still in your gut. And somehow, that's enough. The wind shifts again as you leave the clearing, just slightly, but enough to carry something new to your nose. Not the bite of dandelion, not the brine of seaweed. This is heavier, earthier, deeper, fermented turnips. You know that scent. It has a weight to it, like someone buried ambition and dug it back up 2 winters later. You stop walking for a moment and scan the horizon. And yes, there, under the crooked pine at the field's edge, 2 older soldiers are sharing a squat clay pot and a pair of chopsticks stained from long use. You don't even have to ask. You know what it is: pickled, funky, slightly sweet, slightly wrong. One of them waves you over, grinning like this is a picnic and not a preparation for potential chaos. You oblige, crouching beside the pot, where the fermented scent curls into your sinuses like mischief. They offer a bite. You hesitate, then you take it. The turnip's been steeped in miso, maybe soy dregs, maybe rice bran. No one's really sure anymore. It's mushy, fibrous, with a flavour that can't decide between vegetable and old boots. But you chew it anyway, because this is what you do before battles. You make odd choices and pretend they're strategic. Historians agree that turnips were a dietary mainstay in nearly every rural province, preserved in underground crocks and dragged into service when meat was gone and rice was rationed. When fermented, they became part medicine, part meal, part mystery. Known as senmaizuke in some regions, these pickles were praised for their ability to ignite the belly and cool the blood, though no one could explain exactly what that meant. Historians still argue whether fermented turnips genuinely helped digestion or just created conversation. One medical scroll claimed they stirred the humours. Another described them more bluntly: eaten slowly, they encourage fortitude; eaten quickly, regret. You eat yours slowly. The older soldier chuckles. Good batch, been in the pot since the winter before last. You raise an eyebrow. That's comforting. Still kick harder than most horses, he adds, patting his stomach proudly. You glance at the pot. It looks ordinary, just a grey clay jar. But there's a sense of ceremony to it, like it's an anchor tethering these 2 veterans to something beyond the current mission. A reminder that life continues. Fermentation doesn't care about sword fights. It just happens. Another bite. The flavour deepens. Complex now, sour at the back of your throat, almost smoky. You find yourself wondering, did someone add dried fish to this? A touch of yuzu peel? A mistake that turned into genius? You won't ask. There's a rumour in one southern regiment that the perfect fermented turnip can only be made when buried beside a battlefield. Something about the vibration of conflict enhancing the flavour. That's almost certainly nonsense. But then again, these taste intense. Someone once told you that a good pickle has a soul. You never believed them. Now you're not so sure. You finish your share and nod thanks. The older soldier taps the rim of the pot 3 times like knocking on wood, a G on wood, and says, "For the gut, for the gods, for the gamble." You like that. You walk away. The taste lingers, stubborn and strange, like a question that refuses to be answered. A few paces ahead, one of the younger soldiers is chewing a root strip with visible skepticism. He catches your eye. Is it supposed to burn after you swallow? You shrug. Depends how long it was buried. He grimaces. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. You both laugh, nervously maybe, but real. As you fall back into formation, your stomach churns lightly. Not discomfort, just activity. Something is working now, turning, waking up. That's the thing about fermented food. It changes you. You just hope it's in the right direction. The sun's reached its zenith now, painting everything in a warm, unflinching light. Shadows shrink. Armor glints. And the smell of iron, not blood, not yet, but polished blades, and the memory of cuts begins to creep into your thoughts. You try to ignore it. And then, mercifully, someone passes you a tiny cup. You stare at it, golden, translucent, and rippling gently as it's handed off with care. Plum wine, umeshu, sweet, sharp, comforting, dangerous. You hold it delicately like it might evaporate if you blink too hard. It's not much, just a sip or two, but it carries weight. Not physical, but emotional, cultural, familial, ceremonial. It's not about getting drunk. No one's here for that. This isn't celebration. It's reflection and courage. You swirl the cup gently. The scent rises, ripe plums, aged sugar, a trace of something you can't name but recognize in your bones. You sip. It's cool, smooth. Sweetness first, then that slow burn, gentle but unmistakable, sliding down the throat and blooming low in your chest like a lantern being lit. Someone nearby sighs like they've just come in from a storm. Historians agree that umeshu was not a standard part of battlefield rations, but it did appear in ceremonial contexts, last toasts, offerings to the gods of war, or rare morale-boosting gestures from commanding officers before major engagements. Some units believed that a single sip of plum wine before battle would guide the spirit back to its body if it became untethered in the chaos. Historians still argue whether it truly calmed the nerves or simply helped people pretend better. One letter from a mid-ranking officer wrote, "I drink to remember who I am and forget what I'm about to do." You sip again. The taste is rounder this time, fuller, and with it comes memory of laughter by lantern light, of an old man pouring from a clay jug with chipped sides and steady hands, of a promise made not to win but to return, even if it meant crawling. You glance around. Several others are holding their own tiny cups. Some sip quietly. Some stare into the liquid like it might hold a map to somewhere better. No one talks, because this moment isn't about speech. It's about stillness, and the things you never get to say once the noise starts. Your fingers warm around the cup. You think of home, of names you haven't spoken in months, of smells from a kitchen, of arguments over nothing, of that one summer when everything bloomed at the same time. Someone nearby breaks the silence, a whisper. Here's to not dying. You raise your cup. Clink, you drink. There's a tale from an old mountain clan. Every time you sip umeshu before a battle, you're feeding a memory that will find you in the next life. A way to mark your soul. So that when you're reborn, you crave plums again. Not because of flavor, but because of something deeper. Something tied to courage. You hope that's true. You finish your wine, then place the cup gently into your sash. Empty, but not discarded. You feel lighter. Not fearless, just slightly more whole. And that's the power of umeshu. It doesn't erase fear. It just reminds you that something sweet exists in the world, even on a day like this. And sometimes that's enough. The wind rises again, sharper this time with a dry rasp like bones whispering secrets to the tall grass. It cuts across your neck and flicks the edge of your helmet, as if to remind you no more tea, no more wine. Time's ticking, but your attention is stolen by a sound far less poetic. Crunch, not rice cracker, not gravel. Another crunch. You glance over. A soldier, crouched low and grinning like a gremlin, is eating something brown and oddly shiny from a small, cloth-wrapped pouch. He looks up, catches your stare, and says proudly, "Crickets." You blink. What? Seasoned, toasted, salted. He offers you one between two fingers. Want one? You hesitate for exactly the amount of time it takes your stomach to say maybe, and your pride to say absolutely not. But then you take it. Because refusing a snack in this context feels worse than eating it. You pop the cricket in your mouth. It's crunchy, light, a little nutty, very salty. It's not bad, it's also not great, but it's food. Historians agree that insects were part of rural and emergency diets throughout Japan's history, especially grasshoppers and crickets, which were abundant, easy to trap, and packed with protein. Though less documented in formal battle texts, oral traditions and regional diaries confirm that many lower-ranking soldiers and scouts relied on them during long campaigns with failing supply lines. Historians still argue whether eating insects was a mark of shame, necessity, or secret pride. Some documents refer to them with disdain, the food of the overlooked, others with reverence. They sing at night and strengthen the heart. You glance back at the soldier. He's still crunching away. Caught these 2 days ago, he says. Fed them rice husks to clean their guts out. You raise your eyebrows. You cleansed your crickets. Of course, I'm not an animal. That makes you laugh harder than it should. Another soldier wanders over and snags a couple without asking. Better than that dried fish sludge from this morning, he mutters. You hand your cricket-chewing friend back his pouch. He offers it to a passing runner who flinches, considers, then accepts 2, just 2. The pouch continues to make the rounds, a bizarre little communion. Someone claims there's a superstition in the southern mountains that crickets carry the voices of ancestors, that eating them before battle invites protection, or judgment, depending on how recently you cleaned your sword. You once heard a commander say, if you can chew a bug with confidence, you can face anything. He followed that with a story about losing a bet and having to eat 10 cicadas, raw. You don't remember what the bet was. You just remember the way he said, they kept moving. You shake the thought away. Back in the present, the last cricket is eaten. The pouch is folded neatly. The crunching stops. And in the silence that follows, it's weirdly peaceful, like chewing noise was holding everyone together. You glance at the horizon. It's closer now. The part where the trees end, where grass gives way to churned earth, and old banners and the unknown. Your mouth still tastes faintly of salt and something vaguely roasted. It lingers in the back of your throat. Not unpleasant, not quite familiar. But you feel ready. There's something about eating a bug in broad daylight that rearranges your priorities. You're not invincible, but you're no longer unsure. You wiped your fingers on your sleeve, not because they're dirty, but because something small and wild just passed through you, and that, oddly, is exactly what you needed. You don't realize how hungry you still are until you catch the scent. It's not sweet, not sharp, not strange, just warm millet porridge. The scent rises from a steaming pot someone's had hidden under a travel cloak, tucked between 2 rocks. You spot it just off to the left, surrounded by 4 soldiers who clearly woke up early enough to prepare something resembling a real meal. One of them stirs with a carved wooden ladle, the kind passed down from grandmother to grandson and then somehow smuggled into war. You drift closer. No one speaks, you don't have to. They see you, and a bowl is already being ladled and offered without fuss. The porridge is thick, pale, clumpy, in the way all good porridge should be, with a slight golden tint from toasted grain. No garnish, no pickles, just soft heat in a rough ceramic bowl. You grip it with both hands and let the warmth seep into your palms. For a second, just one, it feels like breakfast at home. The kind where nothing bad is waiting for you at the door. You take a spoonful. It's bland, comfortingly so, like silence made edible. Historians agree that millet was a staple grain for both poor farmers and travelling soldiers, especially during periods of rice scarcity. Easy to grow, tolerant of bad soil, and quick to cook, millet became the unofficial grain of hardship and endurance. Historians still argue whether millet was truly respected or simply tolerated as the food of not dying. One general allegedly refused to eat rice on campaign, claiming millet taught humility and made the blade lighter. You're not sure about blades, but your shoulders do relax after 3 spoonfuls. Someone across the fire snorts. I'd give my left sandal for 1 egg. Another replies, I'd give both for a chicken. You keep eating. It's not exciting, but it's steady. And right now, that's better. There's nothing hidden in millet. No surprises. It's not trying to impress you or reinvent itself. It's just there. Reliable. A kind of edible quiet. You glance around and realize you're not the only one who needed this. Everyone here is chewing more slowly, talking less, staring into their bowls like fortune tellers reading warm mush. One of the older men adds a splash of tea to his bowl and stirs. It darkens slightly, steams again. He catches your look and shrugs. Old trick.
Adds flavour.
Adds flavour. You try it? He's right. It helps. You once heard a saying, millet before dawn, survival by dusk. You thought it was dramatic. Feels like a promise. There's another tale, half folk wisdom, half campfire fiction, about a soldier who claimed millet porridge saved his life. Not because it made him strong, but because he tripped, carrying his bowl, spilled it all over himself, and ducked at just the right time to avoid an arrow meant for his head. He later tattooed a bowl of porridge on his shoulder. You wonder if that story's true. Probably not, but you hope so. You scrape the last bits from your bowl and savour the final mouthful. The grains have gone soft now, sticky and yielding. You swallow and feel heavier, but in a good way, like something inside has settled. The wind shifts again just slightly. That old tension creeps back in, the kind that tightens jaws and slows footsteps, the kind that makes you check your sword for the third time, even though you know it's there. You pass your bowl back with a nod. No words exchanged. No need. You feel better now. Not stronger. Just more there. And sometimes, before everything changes, that's all you need to be. The porridge warmth fades from your belly just as the air begins to cool again. Not from the wind, not from clouds, just from tension. A hush creeps in like a held breath, a waiting silence thick enough to chew. And then you hear it, a crunch, sharp, crisp, rhythmic. Not the crack of a senbei, not the grind of gravel underfoot. This is something different, lighter, hollow, lotus root chips. You look to your left and spot a figure crouched under a gnarled tree, holding a cloth-wrapped bundle. Inside, thin rounds of fried lotus root, lacy, golden, and slightly curled like little sunbursts. He holds one up to the light and peers through its pattern before popping it into his mouth. You grin. Lotus root renken wasn't a staple, it was an oddity, a surprise, crunchy, slightly sweet, with a flavour like the earth forgot to clean itself up, but sliced thin and fried, or sun-dried and toasted. It became a rare treat, especially on the march. You approach slowly, and he offers you one without speaking. You take it, grateful. It crunches delicately between your teeth, like breaking a dried leaf in autumn. The taste is subtle, nutty, with a faint echo of the pond where it grew. It's not rich, not heavy, just curious. Historians agree that lotus root was used both in temple cooking and travel food, prized for its symbolic value as much as for sustenance. Its hollow structure was seen as a symbol of clarity, of inner emptiness and outer strength, a plant rooted in mud but growing toward the light. Historians still argue whether samurai ate it regularly or only during supply breaks near water-rich regions. Some records describe entire crates of it being dried and packed for coastal campaigns. Others insist it was too delicate to be battlefield food, more of a festival dish that made its way into war, purely by nostalgia. You chew slowly. There's something oddly calming about the uniform shape, the little air holes. Each chip is a perfect ring of habit and patience. Beside you, the soldier wipes his fingers and says, "My sister slices them thinner than paper." You nod. "My brother burns them every time. We still eat them anyway." You both chuckle. The crunching continues, gentle and deliberate. Around you, others begin pulling out their own strange rations. A dried persimmon, a cube of mochi, Someone is slicing a boiled egg with thread, but the lotus root keeps stealing your attention. There's a myth that those who eat lotus root the morning of battle will not falter when the ground shakes beneath them, that the holes let fear pass through without catching. You don't believe in that kind of thing, but you still eat another chip. Because you want to believe. Someone once carved a lotus flower into the side of a scabbard, not for luck, not for beauty. But, as a reminder, even in the muddiest places, something intricate can grow, something elegant, something that doesn't apologize for being a little odd. You finish your share and dust the crumbs from your fingers. A petal from a nearby weed drifts into your path. You step around it without thought, but catch yourself mid-motion. You stop. Pick it up. Slide it into the fold of your sash. It's not useful, but it's something small and whole and unnecessary, and those are the things that matter most today. Across the field, the first orders begin to echo. Formation lines, checklists, final counts. You tighten your straps, adjust your grip. The crunch is gone now, but it's still in your head, and that, somehow, makes you ready. A gust of wind tumbles across the field, kicking dust into your eyes and rattling the tall grass like a warning whispered from the earth. You squint, duck your head, and pull your scarf a little tighter around your neck. It's almost time. And then, because life has a sense of humor, you hear the unmistakable slurp of noodles. You turn your head. Yes, someone, full armor, calm face, entirely unbothered, is sitting cross-legged on a blanket, eating Samen noodles from a lacquered bowl like he's at a picnic instead of a war-staging ground. You blink. Another slurp. You step closer. He doesn't look up, but he gestures toward the pot beside him. Thin broth still steaming, the noodles long and pale, nearly translucent, coiled like sleeping serpents. You don't ask questions. You kneel, dip a hand-carved cup into the pot and lift. A modest serving, just enough to twist around a pair of chopsticks and drop into your mouth in one clean motion. And immediately regret your timing. Slurping noodles in armor is not elegant. One strand flicks against your nose, another lands squarely on your chin. Broth dribbles along your jaw and disappears into the cloth of your underlayer. You don't care. It's perfect, cool, salty, and somehow impossibly refreshing. The noodles are slippery but satisfyingly firm. The broth, maybe flavored with scallion and soy, is light but deep. It slides down your throat like silk tied to a prayer. You glance over. The man grins. Armor always makes it awkward. You nod, chewing. Summon's not really battle food, he adds, but my mother swears by it. He slurps again, then says, she says if you can eat calmly, you can fight calmly. You try not to choke on a noodle. Historians agree that Samen, a thin wheat noodle, often served cold, was a staple summer food in peaceful times. Light, easy to digest and fast to cook, it was more common in temple kitchens and noble homes than war camps, but some soldiers did find ways to carry bundles of dried noodles, rehydrating them when water and time allowed. Historians still argue whether soldiers ever ate noodles this close to battle. Most scrolls mention porridge or rice balls, but one story from a 17th century diary tells of a scout who refused to leave for his mission until he'd eaten a full serving of noodles to calm the stomach and untangle the nerves. You like that image? Something about long strands of food unraveling inner knots. It feels true. You swirl the remaining broth in your cup. The last of the noodles settle at the bottom like soft threads. You lift them out, tilt your head back, and slurp them in with as much grace as you can manage under a helmet strap. Another soldier passes by, raises an eyebrow. You shrug. The noodle eater beside you says he'll be back. And sure enough, 2 minutes later, the pot is surrounded by 5 men slurping like synchronized swimmers. No one says much. Because slurping is talking in a way, it says, I'm still human. I still get to taste something, even here. You remember another soldier, young, serious, too serious, who used to carry a bundle of dried noodles tied with twine around his belt. He'd soak them in his canteen cup, humming quietly. When asked why, he said, "They remind me that time still moves forward." When he was wounded in the leg, the first thing he asked for wasn't water, it was noodles. You finish your broth, wipe your mouth, and bow your head to the man beside you. He returns the nod and begins packing up, folding the blanket with care, securing the pot with practiced hands. You rise and feel something uncoiling inside you. Not fear, not courage, just readiness. The slurp still echoes faintly in your ears. You let it carry you forward. You're walking again. The ground flattens beneath your feet, dry and gritty now, like it's been scuffed over too many times by boots and hooves and history. The wind has dropped to a murmur. Every breath feels intentional. And then you hear it, crack, crunch, snap, not from the earth this time, from someone cracking walnuts open with the back of a knife. You turn and see two soldiers sitting on a low stone wall, a small pile of green-husked walnuts between them. One's holding a blade, not the kind for war, the kind for food, and he's popping shells open with the quiet ease of someone who's done this since childhood. The other's digging out the meat with his fingernail, eyes distant, chewing without urgency. You walk over. Wordlessly, one of them tosses you a whole walnut. You catch it and sit. No words exchanged, no invitation needed, just you and a walnut and a knife that's seen more kitchen time than combat. You press the edge carefully into the seam, give a twist. The shell pops with a little puff of dust and memory. Inside, golden meat, clean, rich, dry in the way only a wild nut can be. You nibble. It crumbles slightly on your tongue. Bitter at first, then creamy, like wood and warmth. It's perfect. Historians agree that nuts, especially walnuts and chestnuts, were carried by messengers, scouts, and lower-ranking foot soldiers as lightweight, high-fat food for long marches. Easy to store, hard to crush, and surprisingly satisfying.
A handful
could keep you going for miles. Historians still argue whether walnut cracking in camp was just practicality or also a kind of strategy meeting ritual. Some records describe commanders chewing slowly during planning sessions, the cracking rhythm serving as a kind of metronome for war. You believe it. There's something grounding about it. You crack another. This one's stubborn. The shell resists. Your blade slips slightly. You adjust. Try again. It pops. Someone behind you mutters, "That's good luck. The ones that fight hardest always taste better." Another voice adds, "Unless they're rotten inside, then it's an omen." You don't even check. You eat it anyway. It's fine, you think. One soldier offers a bit of salt in a folded cloth. You sprinkle it lightly, and the next walnut sings. Sharp and savory, the salt making the oils bloom across your tongue. The conversation drifts from there. Nothing important. Talk of maps, of horses that refuse to cooperate. Of a woman one man swears is waiting for him in a town he hasn't seen in 6 years. Of a debt owed in sack and poetry. And all the while, the cracking continues. Steady, soft, familiar. You look down at the growing pile of broken shells. It looks like something. A scatter of bones, a field of stories already told. You think of a night long ago, before armor, before orders, when you sat with your grandfather on a porch just like this. No war, just walnuts. He told you the trick was not in strength, but in rhythm. The nut tells you how it wants to be opened. You didn't understand then, you do now. A call goes up from the other side of the field, quiet but clear. It's time. Everyone stands. Some pocket the last of their walnuts. Others leave them behind. You rise, too. Brush dust from your knees. One of the men presses 2 halves of a shell together, fits them perfectly, and hands you the unbroken whole. For after, he says, you nod. Slip it into your sash, because even if there is no after, you'll walk with the thought of one. That's what the walnut's for, a promise in a shell. You tuck the walnut deeper into your sash, right up against your side. It knocks softly against your hip as you move, nothing loud, just enough to remind you it's there. A good luck charm with calories, the best kind. Your boots crunch over dry grass now. Dust puffs up with every step. The horizon sharpens. And just when you think there's nothing left to eat, to remember, to share, something utterly unexpected drifts into the air. Butter? You blink, you sniff again, slower. Yes, definitely butter. And something else, something rich. Shells, heat, crab, you freeze. There, just beyond the crest of a low rise, 4 men are crouched around a wide, shallow pot suspended over coals. The scent is unmistakable. Freshwater crab, charred just enough, simmering in broth with green onions, a slab of butter melting into a lazy spiral of fat. You walk closer and catch the sight of crimson shells peeking from the liquid, the steam rising in lazy clouds. This is not a standard ration, this is something else entirely. Diplomacy, not the formal kind, not with scrolls and envoys and titles. The accidental kind. You recognize one of the men. He's from a different division, maybe even a different clan. His armor's marked differently, but he's laughing. Leaning back on his heels, crab claw in one hand, the other holding a piece of hard rice he's using to soak broth. And sitting across from him, a scout from your own camp. They're not fighting, they're eating. You take a cautious step forward. No one stops you. You kneel. Someone hands you a shell. It's cracked open already. The meat's still warm, still tender. You bite. It's exquisite. Sweet, rich. A little salty from the butter, but bright from the spring onions. The broth has seeped in just enough to soften the edges of the crab's flavor. It's indulgent in a way that makes you suspicious. You say nothing, but your eyes ask. One man, not bothering to introduce himself, says simply, "Caught in the creek just past the rice fields. Neither of us had salt. Both of us had butter. That seemed like a good enough reason not to stab each other." You raise your eyebrows. "Just for lunch," he adds, grinning. "After that, who knows?" You nod. Fair. Historians agree that chance meetings during wartime occasionally resulted in temporary truces, shared wells, brief weather delays, or, in rare cases, communal meals. These pauses were unofficial, undocumented, and often unspoken. But they happened. Historians still argue whether such moments were driven by humanity or hunger. One famous example involved 2 scouts who traded pickled plums under a flag of truce, only to fight in the same field an hour later. The surviving diary reads, "His plum was better, but I had more rice." You dip a scrap of rice cracker into the crab broth. It dissolves instantly, absorbing the butter, the herbs, the faint trace of smoke. You eat it slowly. Another shell is passed, another story shared. Someone jokes about opening a roadside inn if they survive. Someone else says, "Only if there's crab season year-round." A laugh rolls through the group, quiet, tired, honest. You know this can't last. Even now, beyond the rise, your captain's voice carries in the wind. Orders being shouted, units forming ranks, feet stomping into position. The moment is ending, but for now, for these next 3 bites, it's enough. You look across the fire at the scout from the other side. He holds your gaze for just a second, then taps 2 fingers to his brow in mock salute. You do the same, and then you stand, wipe your mouth, walk away from the smell of butter and the illusion of peace, but you carry the flavor and the knowledge that even in the middle of war, 2 hungry men might still agree on crab. The smell of crab fades behind you, tugged away by the wind and swallowed by the business of war. Around you, the air grows tighter, not darker, just more focused. The kind of tension that pulls men upright, straightens spines, quiets chatter without anyone saying a word. You reach the gathering point. Flags are planted, armor is checked, blades are drawn and sheathed again with practiced rhythm. You settle into formation, body still humming faintly from the meal, but mind beginning to narrow. You know this edge. You've stood on it before. It's the place just before noise, just before motion, just before someone starts yelling and everything you've eaten, feared, or prayed suddenly becomes irrelevant. But even now, one last scent rises, not crab, not rice, something older, smokier. You glance left. Someone is kneeling beside a low stone, gently lifting the lid off a blackened pot. A strange smell curls out, bitter, dry, and oddly familiar. Charcoal biscuits. Your face must betray the memory, because the soldier looks up and grins. Want one? You hesitate, then nod. He tosses you a flat, dark disc, not quite round, not quite square, with cracks along the top and a faint scent of barley, ash, and stubbornness. You bite. It crumbles with resistance, not chewy, not soft, not friendly. But, it's food. Just enough grain to keep your blood steady, just enough charcoal to remind you that taste is sometimes beside the point. Charcoal biscuits were never meant to please. They were meant to endure. Historians agree that emergency rations made with ground grain and charcoal powder were distributed during long winter campaigns or in famine-stricken regions, meant to keep the stomach stable, the mind alert, and the bowels calm, bland, dry, dependable. Historians still argue whether these biscuits were a sign of resilience or a failure of supply chains. Some considered them a war crime against palates. Others swore by their grounding effect, calling them stones of discipline. You chew, slowly, each bite a deliberate act of will. One soldier to your right mutters, "I only eat these when I think I might die." Another adds, "I eat them so I don't die." You don't say anything, but you eat every last crumb. There's something calming about food, this flavourless. It's a blank page. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't trigger memory. It simply fills the corners. You glance at the soldier with the pot. "You make them?" "My grandmother," he replies, "bakes a batch every time I leave, calls them guardian stones." You nod. "Mine used to burn the edges on purpose, said it made them stronger." He smiles. Might have been an excuse. Still worked. The pot is empty now. The last biscuit is broken in half and handed to the youngest member of the squad, barely old enough to hold a sword steady. He takes it with both hands, eats slowly, mouth tight. The sky above sharpens. Someone calls out the final formation orders. Shields lift, banners shift. A dull clink runs through the lines like a shiver. The soldier with the pot stands, ties it to his belt with practiced hands. The biscuit taste still lingers, ash and grain, dry but strangely soothing. And then the fire is kicked out. No smoke, no trace, just the soft hush of boots shifting into place. You pull your scarf up, tighten your grip, feel the weight of your weapon, but inside, just beneath your ribs, you carry the silence of that biscuit, the way it demanded nothing. The way it held you steady, and when the shouts come, and the field moves, and the sound of steel becomes a tide, you'll still be chewing, even if only in your mind. The sky is brilliant now, too brilliant. That piercing midday glare, where every shape turns flat and sharp at once, and even the blades of grass seem like they're squinting. You stand in line with the others, helmet adjusted, breath slow. No one's talking, not because they're afraid, well, not just that, but because this is the quiet moment where everyone becomes a statue, waiting, listening, bracing. And then comes the longest moment of all, standing.
Standing watch, no charge, no clash, not yet, just waiting. And that's when you reach into your pouch and find it, one last sliver of something dried, dark, and vaguely bitter. You forgot you packed it. You tug it free with your gloved fingers and grin to yourself. Barley tea stick. Technically not a meal, barely a snack, but a comfort. A thin sliver of roasted barley compressed into a chewy strand of flavour, meant to distract your mouth while your mind tries not to fall apart. You bite the end and suck gently. The taste blooms slowly. Burnt grain, faint sweetness, a ghost of smoke. You roll it against your tongue and feel yourself settle. Because sometimes you need just something, not for hunger, for rhythm. Historians agree that mujicha, barley tea, was often drunk in peaceful households, especially during hot weather.
But when the tea wasn't available, soldiers improvised, roasting barley seeds until they popped, chewing them raw, or fashioning pressed sticks from leftovers, seasoned with salt or vinegar, and carried in sleeves like talismans. Historians still argue whether these barley bits were used for hydration, meditation, or merely to keep jaws moving when silence became unbearable. One scout once wrote, "When you cannot speak, chew." Let the taste remind you that the world still turns. You chew now. The flavor grows darker, more bitter, but oddly warm. Your tongue runs along the edge of your teeth. It's not soft, it's not soothing, it's just present. And that's all you need. A line of archers passes by behind you, silent, loose-limbed, focused. One glances at your barley stick and gives a nod of recognition. He's got one too, tucked behind his ear, like a brush. Another soldier, 2 ranks ahead, reaches into his own sleeve and produces a tiny twist of cloth. Unwraps it, puts something in his mouth, probably the same. You wonder how many of you are chewing right now, in this moment. Not from hunger, not even from ritual, but because the body needs something other to focus on before the shouting starts. A fly lands on your knuckle, you don't swat it. You bite gently on the barley again. The field is still. Then footsteps. Deliberate, heavy, someone approaching from behind, an officer or a runner. But you don't turn, you just stand there, barley stick between your teeth, eyes scanning the line of grass in the distance like it might answer a question you haven't asked yet. Your lips are dry, your heart is not racing, it's waiting. There's a story about a famous archer who claimed his aim improved dramatically when he chewed barley just before loosing an arrow. It slows the nerves, he said, turns the breath into rope. No one ever found the science behind it, but no one argued either. You chew one last time. The stick has lost most of its flavor now, just a hint of roast left. You're not even sure when that happened. The act of chewing became the rhythm of your body. And now, as the first call rises, soft, steady, pulling you all forward, you tuck the spent stick into a fold in your glove, not littered, not thrown, just stored. Because maybe you'll need it again. After, if there is an after. You move with the others. No speech, no glance, just steps. The taste is gone, but your jaw remembers the rhythm. And that's enough. The formation ripples as it moves, rows compressing, feet sinking without needing to be told. The wind changes again, this time carrying sweat and leather and the unmistakable scent of anticipation. You're not breathing faster, but you're suddenly aware of each inhale, like your ribs have opinions now. And in that oddly alert stillness, someone behind you leans close and whispers, "Want something hot?" You glance over. He's holding a bamboo cup. It's steaming faintly, condensation dripping down the sides. You catch the scent. Roasted barley, again, but smoother, richer. Barley tea, not the chew stick this time, the real thing. You take the cup gratefully. It's warm against your palms, just shy of too hot. You lift it, sip, and let it roll down your throat. Perfect. The tea is toasty, dark, a little bitter, but it glides down smooth, like a quiet affirmation that something still makes sense. It doesn't distract, it focuses. Your heartbeat slows just enough to notice. You take another sip. Historians agree that Mujicha was a staple across all levels of Japanese society, from farmer to noble, especially in the warmer seasons. It's caffeine-free, hydrating, and simple to make. For soldiers, that made it ideal. Boil some roasted barley, pour, share. Historians still argue whether barley tea's presence in war camps was ceremonial or purely practical. Some say commanders used it in lieu of sake for pre-battle toasts to keep heads clear but spirits high. Others say it was more of a comfort item, a gentle luxury tucked into the corner of an otherwise brutal morning. You sip again and find yourself agreeing with both sides. It's not flashy, it's just good. The soldier who offered it gives a nod. Made it last night. Fire was down to embers. Thought it might help. You nod back. It does. Another man asks for a cup, then another. The bamboo tube is passed around with quiet reverence. Everyone takes only a little. No one hoards. The act of sipping feels as important as the tea itself. The warmth spreads down into your hands, up into your cheeks. You remember a childhood afternoon, sunset over the rice fields, your mother handing you a chipped cup of barley tea after chores. No words, just the clink of ceramic on wood and the smell of grain in the air. You finish the cup and return it. Wipe your lips on your sleeve. Your tongue still holds the aftertaste, like browned rice, like the crust of something baked too long, like memory disguised as flavor. You look around and realize everyone is standing taller now, not braver, not louder, just steadier. There's something about a warm drink that reminds the body it's not just a machine. Someone starts humming. A quiet, tuneless melody, not a war song, just a line of music pulled from nowhere. You don't know the words, you hum along anyway. It weaves through the ranks like thread through cloth. And just like that, the waiting doesn't feel so brittle anymore. The enemy is still out there. The blades still need drawing. But the warmth in your chest says, you are still here. You step forward with the others. And in your mouth, the taste of barley lingers like a promise that the fire will be lit again tonight. The music fades like breath through cupped hands, and the humming stops, not abruptly, but with the kind of shared intuition only men on the edge of something sharp can feel. Now it's just the wind again, and the grass rustling in that eerie, rhythmless way it always does before things change. You shift your weight. The leather at your hips creaks softly. Somewhere a sword is unsheathed with a whisper. But before the first step, before the orders come, someone near you does something completely absurd. He pulls out a pickle, bright green, glossy, extremely sour, and takes a bite. You smell it instantly, sharp, tangy, vinegary. It cuts through the tension like a blade through silk. A few heads turn. One man groans. "Oh, not now. You're going to reek." "Better to smell like a pickle than feel like a corpse," the man replies, chewing with theatrical satisfaction. You grin despite yourself. Pickles before a fight. It's not that uncommon, and in some units it's a tradition. Tsukemono, preserved vegetables of every kind, were beloved on and off the battlefield, not just for their flavor, but for their bite. That sour spark that woke up the tongue, lit up the senses and told your body, pay attention, this matters. Today it's a cucumber, but you've seen everything from daikon to eggplant to garlic scapes, pickled to oblivion and stuffed into pouches wrapped in oiled paper. Soldiers would trade them like currency, share them like talismans, eat them like declarations of intent. Historians agree that pickled foods were critical to samurai survival, rich in salt, easy to store, and said to brighten the eye and cut through cowardice. Historians still argue whether the ritual of eating something that sour just before battle was medical or psychological. One scroll describes a commander who insisted on a bite of takwan just before charging. Better to carry the taste of life into the fire. You believe it. You felt it. There's something about sourness that narrows your thoughts, sharpens your edges, makes you less interested in fear and more interested in what happens next. The man offers you the pickle. You accept. It's slippery, cold, crisp. The moment it touches your tongue, you flinch, but in the best way. Your eyes water slightly, your scalp tingles, your whole face puckers like you bit the moon. It's perfect. You chew, slowly, deliberately, letting the vinegar run through the spaces between your teeth, down your throat, into your chest. It's like drinking lightning, friendly lightning. Another soldier pulls out a piece of pickled plum, pops it into his mouth like a coin. Someone else has a strip of radish, dyed purple with shiso leaves, chewing like it might give him a different outcome entirely. No one's talking now, but everyone's chewing. It's like a final chorus, low, private, silent. The world stills. Somewhere behind you, a banner lifts, a bird calls once and then not again. You finish the last bite of your pickle, your mouth vibrating with leftover sour. You wipe your lips with your thumb and step forward. There's salt in your blood now, vinegar in your mouth, and steel in your hands. The line begins to move, not fast, not yet, but with that slow, dreadful momentum that builds from the ankles up. One step, then another. You can feel the entire formation shifting, a great, slow ripple of armor and breath and unsaid things.
It's the march into teams.
March into the thick of it, the part you don't train for, where the nerves don't vanish but calcify, locking into place like old wood. And then you see him. Just ahead, a soldier, not a friend but familiar, reaches into his sash and pulls out something entirely unexpected. A manju red bean cake. He unwraps it slowly, carefully, like it's a scroll from home. The soft dough gives under his fingers. He breaks it in half, exposing the dark, sweet filling inside. Steam curls upward, barely, but enough to remind everyone within a 10-foot radius that this is not a war snack. This is a memory. He offers you the other half without looking. You take it. The outer layer is pillowy. The filling is dense and just sweet enough to remind you that not everything in life has to have a purpose, that some things just are. You bite into it, soft, gentle, warm somehow. And in that one bite, the field around you blurs a little. You're not in formation, you're a kid again, sitting in the shade, someone handing you something soft and sweet and entirely undeserved. The kind of food that has no business being eaten in armor. And yet, here you are. Historians agree that manju and other red bean sweets were not standard battlefield fare, but they appeared anyway, brought by loved ones, purchased secretly before departure, smuggled in bento boxes wrapped in layered cloth and hope. Historians still argue whether these sweets served any nutritional purpose, or whether they were purely psychological. One foot soldier's journal recounts how he ate manju on the eve of every battle, so that if I died, my mouth would remember kindness. You chew slowly, the bean paste clinging to your tongue like a lullaby. It's not a jolt, not a slap of sourness or bitterness, just comfort. Quiet, gentle, necessary. Around you, no one mocks the gesture, they just watch. One soldier nods once, as if to say, "Good idea." Another wipes at one eye with the back of his glove, pretending it's dust. The man beside you licks the bean paste from his thumb and smiles. "First thing I'll eat again when I get back." You nod. You don't say it aloud, but the same thought crosses your mind. If I get back, I want an entire plate of these, still warm, still soft. There's a whisper in the air now, a shift of command. The tone changes, lines tighten, movement becomes precise. You pocket the last crumb of the cake in a fold of your sleeve, not to save it, but because it feels wrong to drop it. Even the smallest bit feels sacred, a taste of home, of something without edges, of something that expects nothing but gives anyway. Your fingers find your blade's hilt and rest there. You are ready, but you are also full of something soft, and that, in this moment, is its own kind of strength. The line halts, not from confusion, but design. A command, silent and practiced, ripples through the formation. Every boot stills, every breath tightens. Even the birds have the decency to go quiet. This is it. You're standing at the edge now, grass still underfoot, but just beyond, mud, scarred earth, and waiting. You adjust your grip. And then, because your body wants something to do, your hand drifts to your pouch. One last bite. You find it, a thin square of sweet rice, wrapped in pressed bamboo leaf. You'd forgotten it. It's been at the bottom of the pouch all morning, flattened by armor, warmed by your own breath. You unwrap it carefully. It's sticky. Your fingers pull slightly as you lift the square out. The scent is faint but distinct. Glutinous rice, honey, maybe a brush of dried citrus, peel from whoever packed it. You take a bite. It clings to your teeth, soft, dense, sweet. Not aggressively sweet, just enough to feel like a secret. Like something made quietly in the kitchen while someone hummed to themselves, believing in your return. You close your eyes for half a breath. And chew. This is the last meal. Not in a dramatic, you're going to die kind of way, but in a this is the final moment before the world tilts way. You open your eyes again, and around you others are doing the same. One man eats a sliver of dried apple. Another downs a mouthful of barley. A woman beside you, armor marked with clay stains, closes her eyes while biting into something soft and pink. Peach jelly, maybe. No one speaks, but there's a shared rhythm. This is the last bite before. A strange calm fills your chest. The taste of rice still lingers, sticky on your molars. You don't clean your hands. You don't need to. The battle won't mind. You draw your sword, not quickly, not for show. Just a quiet, practiced motion like stretching before a long walk. The signal goes up. You exhale slowly, and the last bite anchors you, because food wasn't a luxury today. It was memory, it was ritual, it was armor. You move with the others, silent, solid, whole. The leaf from your rice square flutters to the ground. You don't watch it land, you don't need to look back, you carry it with you. And now, everything grows quiet again. The clash you expected? It never comes, not here, not in this moment. Because the tale has drawn to a close, and you've stepped off the battlefield, boots dusty, belly full, thoughts soft. Let the images drift now, the plum sharp and puckered, the grilled eel crackling beside a river, the sticky mochi clinging like old promises, the soft bean cake sweet like a memory. You've tasted every season, every silence between footsteps, every secret passed hand to hand before dawn. You made it. You didn't run. You didn't freeze. You stood, a little crooked maybe, but still breathing. And in the end, that's enough. Now, let the heat of the fire dim behind your eyelids. Let your grip loosen. Let your jaw unclench. You don't need to chew anymore. You don't need to carry anything tonight. Not a blade, not a bowl, not a story. You did well. You heard the whispers of the pickles, the crunch of the rice, the sweet hush of tea. Let them fade now, one by one. Let the field grow distant. Let the sky dim. Let your breath come slower. You're not walking anymore. You're resting. You're safe. You're home. Sweet dreams, soldier.